In the years after Robin Murphy disappeared, dark truths began to surface. A man with a long history of assaults bragged in a bar that he was responsible for Robin and Josette's murders. Later, he told a fellow prisoner the same thing. Meanwhile, the convictions of Andrew Krivak and Anthony DePippo began to unravel, leading to the shocking revelations in court, including evidence tied directly to Robin. 30 years on, Robin's family is still waiting for answer, and her story is still unfolding in the shadows of injustice. This is part 2 of her story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This week, we are joined by Nora McLellan.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
So, Vanessa, last week we began the story of Robin Murphy, who went missing from Carmel, New York in 1995, which I'm going to ask your thoughts in a second. But because Robin's story was so entangled with other cases, it involved murder and assault and wrongful convictions, I encourage everyone to listen to that episode first. We don't often do that, but there's a lot going on in that episode. Now, first, a quick summary reminder. Robin was this talented 17-year-old from Carmel, which was a small town not far from New York City. She made music, wrote poetry, she loved bands, and the day she disappeared, she went to the local strip mall a short distance from her home, and she was going to meet her boyfriend, Matt. While she was there, she talked to a man named H, who she knew primarily through his girlfriend. And he had a long history, primarily of things like burglary, but also accusations of sexual assault. And those never reached a conviction, though, which we're going to talk about in this episode, because I know last episode, Vanessa was like, tell me more about this guy, right? Because before, he's just kind of a shadow in this story now. Police initially treated her case as a runaway case, but a few days later, her belongings were found behind this, mall. And soon after, Carmel police began to say that, we don't believe she ran away. In the fall after she disappeared, the body of 12-year-old Josette Wright was found in the woods by a hunter. Now, Josette had been reported missing from the same area as Robin, but on October 3rd, 1994, so before Robin went missing. She was missing for 13 months before she was found, and her case was handled by the sheriff's department, who soon arrested 2 teenagers, Anthony DePippo and Andrew Krivak. Witnesses, including Anthony's ex-girlfriend Denise, testified that they had seen Anthony and Andrew when the rape and murder of Josette took place. They had this case against them, and both were convicted of the crime. But in the years after, they were fighting those convictions. Now, last week, we just left off with the discovery that H, the last person to see Robin, had been represented by Anthony's lawyer in past criminal cases. And that would only be an issue if H had been considered a suspect in Josette's murder. And it turns out he had been. Now, the failure to disclose a conflict of interest formed the backbone of one of Anthony's attempts at freedom. And it's through Anthony's court cases that we learn a lot about H and his history. Now, there was a relatively recent Rolling Stone article that details a lot of this, much more detailed specifically about Anthony and Andrew, but I'm going to continue to use the aliases that Rolling Stone used for the women in this story, many of whom were young girls when they initially encountered H. Now, their stories here come from some of the work that Anthony's lawyers did in building a case to free Anthony, just to kind of set up where we're going to be going when we get started. But first, I want to ask Vanessa what she's thinking about Robin's story thus far.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not sure what to think at this point, because I have a different view of it, because obviously we know it's going to be H, right? That's the person with the most connection to it. But then I'm also curious about what's going to happen with Anthony and Andrew, and how Josette and Robin actually, how that will come to connect at some point. So mostly, I guess I have thoughts, but I'm just kind of also just waiting to see where this goes, because there's so many people right now involved and so many different things.
I mean, this is
and you know how, I'm always annoyed about, the whole runaway thing, how much valuable time we lost with that idea.
That's what happened.
Why not just look anyway?
Yeah, if we had just...
Yeah.
Now, yeah, so like I said in my last intro that I had been like kind of wafting around my house, like trying to decide like how on earth do you tell like this story because it is so layered, right? And there's like so many different parts. And so, you know, in our last episode, it just feels like I was said like, oh, well, there's like a lot of threads. I promised it's all connected. You're gonna have to trust me to like get you there, but like we're still feeling pretty disconnected at the moment because like what does Josette have to do with Robin? Like the police said that they weren't connected,
but yeah.
And like what is going on with Andrew and Anthony? But like does that feel like a side story to like what is happening here? Like it all fits together, but it just like the pieces are so clunky. And because of that, I will say this, that it's really hard to keep Robin in focus.
Right.
Like you start to lose her a bit in this telling, and even Josette as well, because they kind of get overshadowed by what's going on with Anthony and Andrew and who's this guy H and like what is all that, right? But at the end of the day, just as a reminder, we have Robin, who is still missing, and we have Josette, who was a young girl who was murdered very brutally. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of our time digging into H's history, but some of this is necessary to highlight what is happening with Anthony and Andrew and Josette and how that all intersects with Robin.
Okay.
So by the time H is 16, so we're going way back into his past, because we know he's 31 when he is interacting with Robin. He's living in a tent in the woods, and that's when a girl who Rolling Stone gave the alias Tina Z, she met him. Now, so she gives a 2016 deposition, and she says that, I mean, she was 12 when she met him, to be clear. She said that they began a sexual relationship, but that most of their sexual encounters were forced.
So not a relationship.
Yeah, well, so like a small fraction of their interactions
were not forced.
She says were not forced.
Okay.
I mean, again, though she's 12,
he's 16. Sounds forced, but whatever. Okay.
But she did say when he attacked her, he would force her underwear in her mouth. Okay. Now, then we're going to fast forward. In 1991, a 7th grader who went by the alias Rachel in the Rolling Stone reporting said that she was sexually assaulted by H during his relationship with her mother, Sheila, again, another alias. And during this trial, H was represented by the same attorney who would later represent Anthony in the murder case for Josette. During the trial, Rachel had thought that she was going to be able to testify by video in a separate room about what had happened to her. Instead, the judge forced her to testify in front of the man that she says sexually assaulted her. And terrified, she ended up fleeing the courtroom and the charges were dropped.
So that was something huge that happened that could have changed
a lot of things.
A lot of things had it been done the way she was hoping it would be done.
Exactly. And I think that she might have been promised that that's how it would go, or she had made an assumption that that's how it would be. But yeah, they were going to force her to take the stand in front of this man. So earlier I said that in the reporting about H's past, they had said that the charges were dropped. And it's like, well, that's not really a complete story, right? Like you have to understand kind of why that happened. Now, they weren't the only ones who had spoken out. There was Tammy, who was another woman who said that when she was 17, H had hired her to babysit his kid. And she told H that she would often sneak out at night to meet her boyfriend. And one night when she did so, a masked man was waiting for her outside. And she said from his exposed chin, she knew it was H, and that he had forced her to the ground. He crammed her underwear in her mouth, he raped her, and then he threatened her with a knife. Josette would actually be killed 9 weeks after the attack on Tammy. And 19 years after surviving her own attack, Tammy actually died by suicide, and her sister said that Tammy had been haunted by the assault. And then there was a woman that Rolling Stone called Anne Marie, who said that she was 16 when she first met H. She said that he wooed her but that he also sexually assaulted her. I should emphasize at this point she was 16. He was well into adulthood, probably nearing 30. She said these attacks took place over the course of years before she was able to go to an investigator, and H was actually arrested in 1995, not long before Robin's disappearance. Now, Anne-Marie was able to tell investigators that H had told her he'd given Josette a ride on or around the day that she disappeared. When Anne-Marie's case about the sexual assaults that she's experienced went to trial, H was actually represented by the same attorney that would later represent Anthony. Yeah.
Not great.
Now, this time during Anne-Marie's case against him, H gave his attorney a photo album of nude photos of Anne-Marie. And the lawyers argued that this was proof that the sex between them must have been consensual.
Yeah. Is it?
No.
No.
No, those two things are not related at all.
Right.
So, yeah. Now, again, the charges were dropped. So this was the 1995 case that the newspapers at the time of Robin's disappearance were talking about, where the charges were dropped and the case was sealed. This was Anne-Marie. Now, given all that timing, I do think Anne-Marie was the person that H referred to as his girlfriend that he was having trouble with when he was talking to Robin. But Anne-Marie was far from it. She had actually fled the state after the charges were dropped, and she was hiding out in a series of women's shelters. This was not a case of them not getting along or having difficulty in their relationship. This was Anne-Marie running for her life. But H still managed to find her.
Okay, so this is the girlfriend that he was having trouble with?
I believe so. Yeah, that's how the pieces, I think, fit together. Yeah.
And she's closer in age to Robin than...
Yeah.
So when I was like, why would a 31-year-old be venting to a 17-year-old about their relationship? Because he's also dating a 17-year-old.
So I don't think she's 17, but she's quite young.
Is she like 20 at this
I think
point?
she's still in her late teens, early 20s,
Okay.
probably. So H, he manages to track her down. And she says that early that April 1995, he actually did abduct her and placed a knife at her throat. And the only way that she got away was that she screamed extremely loudly, hoping to save herself. And it startled him enough that he ran away. It was a few nights later that Robin actually went missing. Now, all of this was pretty damning evidence, but when H was never arrested for any of those crimes in 1995, etc., he actually continued on. This time he started a relationship with another woman that Rolling Stone called Paula. So you would ask, like, where is this guy?
Yeah.
After Robin goes missing. He goes to a different state. He starts a relationship with this woman, Paula. Now, like the other women, she also experienced sexual abuse in her relationship with H, but their relationship gave him access to something else. Paula's friends had kids, like Lainey, who was 7 years old and would sometimes spend the night at Paula's house. Like, she thought of Paula like an aunt. Lainey would testify that H molested her and took photos of her. And the following year is when she was able to report him. So when she was 8 years old. At that time, he actually was already in jail for sexually assaulting Paula. This time, he actually was convicted for the crimes against Paula and Lainey, and he received 30 years to life. During the investigation into those crimes, so this is 2001, 2002, police would find what they would call the biggest break in Robin's case. But they would keep those details to themselves, and it's only revealed recently through Anthony and Andrew's continued legal fight what that big break was. So I want you to put a pin in that information because I know you want to ask what it is. And we're going to circle back to that in a bit. But that's who H is in kind of a nutshell.
And we'll go back to that.
Yes, we're going to go back
As
to
promised.
what the
I'll
big
just-
break was.
So I won't even ask.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, Anthony and Andrew, they didn't wait long for their fight to freedom. Like I said, Andrew tried to appeal the year after his conviction, but it didn't go very far. And one of the biggest sticking points actually remained his confession that he'd sexually assaulted Josette, even though he after said, like, this was a confession under duress. I didn't actually mean it. And I think because of that, Anthony always had a better shot because he never confessed to anything. His first attempt at freedom is after he learns some key details about H, right?
Imagine sitting in jail and just being like, wait, what? I'm here, but that guy
Yeah.
did that? Like, yeah, it would be, there are more victims than just the girls here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, at this point, I don't think Anthony knows much about H's intricate history. He's going to
Okay.
learn that over the coming years, right?
Imagine how shocking, though.
Like, oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Anthony learns in 1988 that a conversation happens at a bar. Like, I'm not sure how he learned this, but a conversation
He
happens.
learned this in 1988 or 98, or he learned that it happened?
He learned that it happened in 1988. So there's this man named Stephen Keenan who's at a bar, and he's at the bar with H.
Okay.
And H tells him that he has committed 3 murders, one of which was Josette, one of which was Robin, and one of which was a teenage girl in Connecticut. Now, Stephen was able to provide a sworn affidavit that H told him that he had killed Josette and left her off Fields Road, but he mistakenly left his hunting knife there. He also went on to say H did that he'd killed Robin after she sprayed him with mace when he was, in his words, trying to have sex with her. So, other words, sexual assault, yes. Yeah. And that he dumped her body in a quarry. And that explains why a few years later, this intense search of Tilly Cole happens, right?
Tilly Cole being the quarry. Every time you say it, I'm thinking that sounds like a person's name.
I think it is like a controversial author's name.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's just a weird name for a quarry. But anyway, yes.
Okay. Now, so Stephen also says that H told him that he killed a 13-year-old in Connecticut named Mary, and that he threw her body off of a bridge in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Now, police seem to believe that this was a girl named Marianne Measles, but I think it's important to add here that other people have been convicted for Marianne's death. And so, yeah. There's a lot going on here. Now, one of the problems with this barroom confession, though, is that Stephen's not exactly on the up and up himself, right? He ends up in prison himself, and he was actually at our closest maximum security prison, which is Clinton Correctional, for holding a woman at knife point and threatening to kill her. So, got a lot going on there. Now, the judge at the time, he sided with the prosecution that the statements that were made here had no possibility of being true. So, yeah, he's like, what? No, I don't believe that like any of this actually happened. And that's likely, I'm guessing, because Marianne's case seemed to be locked up and solved, right? Like it's this.
But so did Robin's.
Yeah, so like the judge says, like, I don't think the jury would find any differently if we tried this case again tomorrow. And so he was like, no. You're not going to get a new trial based on Stephen's statements. And then a second informant came forward. This one's a jailhouse informant. This is a man named Joseph. He said that he had been in prison with H. So this is after H has been convicted of the assaults on Paula and Lainey. Right. And he says, like, one day he's in the showers and he overheard H talking about the cases in Carmel with another inmate. And as someone who had lived in the Carmel area, this caught Joseph's attention. So he later sought out H because he was like, well, tell me about the hometown gossip, right? Now, H goes on to tell Joseph that Josette had been asking him to babysit for his kid.
So that's the connection.
Yeah. Now, he said, in his words, this is H's perspective, that Josette kept flirting with him. And he told her that his girlfriend wouldn't like her being the babysitter.
Gross. Really gross.
Now, around the time she disappeared, he said that he actually picked her up and that she got into the car after he told her that she could come babysit his kid. And he told Joseph, in his words, that she'd had sex with him, though she needed to be, quote, persuaded.
So we know what that means.
Yeah. So obviously, again, sexual assault. He then said of the case against him that they'd gotten, quote, 2 other suckers. So law enforcement was not going to go after him in Josette's case. I will say, and Joseph says this himself, he never says explicitly that he murdered Josette, to be clear.
He never says it to Joseph.
No.
But he said it to Stephen.
He never said it to specifically Joseph.
To Joseph,
So
okay.
Joseph is like...
He did this, but he didn't do that.
He...
According to what he...
Well, he didn't explicitly say he didn't do it.
Okay, so you just left that part out.
Yes, he just left that part out of the conversation.
Okay.
Right. Like, I think here there's some implications, but not a direct statement to Joseph.
Okay.
Okay. But he then talks about someone who everyone assumes is Robin and says that they found a necklace in his possession, in H's possession, that police had wondered if it had been hers. And he also told Joseph that you can't convict someone without a body, and that if they hadn't found Robin yet, they never would. So again, he stops short of saying specifically in this conversation with Joseph, according to Joseph, that he murdered Robin.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to remind everyone, including those who live in Putnam County, New York, that cases without bodies move forward all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, H would be wrong in that. Now, Joseph says he's in shock about what he just heard. So he goes back to his cell and he writes it all down. And he tucks it in with his own legal papers, but he doesn't tell anyone about this. Now, years later, Joseph is being transferred to another prison. Okay. And in this transfer to the other prison, he's held briefly at the Putnam County Jail. Coincidentally, Anthony is there at the same time because he's awaiting a court meeting. So they've brought Anthony there for this court stuff. Joseph is just passing through. And Joseph hears his name and is like, oh, I've got something for you. And Joseph hands him the notes that he had taken from his exchange with H.
That quickly? It's funny because, he sounds very organized.
It's
he took the notes. He knew where the notes were. He knew who Andrew, or it was Anthony, right? Yep. He knew who Anthony was, and he was like, here you go.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, later on, one of the lawyers will be like, that seems coincidental. And Joseph's like, yeah, it does.
Because it was, yeah.
Okay, so this is a pretty big deal because that, along with finding out that his lawyer had a conflict of interest, right, should have been a huge difference maker in Anthony's case. And it was. In 2012, he was brought to trial again, though the judge wouldn't allow in the statements from Stephen or from Joseph. And the defense was also barred from bringing up any testimony about the women who said that they were sexually assaulted by H.
So we couldn't use the notes?
No. Now, this point during this trial...
Why can't we use any of those people?
Yeah, they were like, that's not allowed.
Huh.
Yeah, that's what the judge ruled.
But...
Not allowed.
Oh.
Okay, so the case goes forward, right? And at this point, Adam is there. Adam, for everyone's remembrance, is someone who had given a witness statement. He had originally said that he had witnessed something happening to Josette and that Andrew and Anthony were involved. And he had later recanted this, right? So he's still recanting. He's like, no, that's not what happened.
Oh, was he the second guy to pass out?
No.
Oh, wait, no, that was William.
That was William. So Adam...
Dominic passed out, then William passed out. I forgot all about Adam.
Yeah, Adam was just another...
He was just there.
He was just there.
Okay.
But there was William, who had originally said he was there.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that they went to the fields. Josette was there, but he had passed out, along the way.
Yeah.
And that was originally his statement, and that had been in the original trial. But this time, he recanted. And he said, that was not true.
Yeah.
Denise, though, who had been Anthony's girlfriend, who had said that she had witnessed everything.
Yeah.
She stuck by her story. She said that she did see the rape and murder of Josette, and Anthony was found guilty a second time.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's the one that I don't understand.
Because he had never confessed to anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also just Denise sticking by it when the rest are just yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Denise is a complicated lady from what I can tell.
Okay.
Now, in 2016, Anthony's legal team tries again. This time, the court agreed that the defense should have been allowed to bring in Joseph's statements, as well as the women who had been assaulted by H, because it had been in a manner similar to what was believed to have happened to Josette.
Also, just shouldn't any information be at least listened to?
Yeah, so before essentially, I think they're trying to say that has no bearing on the case because I can see some argument there because H had never been convicted of any of those crimes, right? So
for reasons we talked about?
Yes, for reasons we talked about.
Yeah.
So the courts were like, oh, You're just going on these witness statements that haven't been verified in any sort of way. He's never been convicted of any of those crimes. Also, you're building a case against H, who's not here. This is a case against Anthony. Yeah. But I agree. Those should have been allowed in.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back in a moment. Now, Denise, at this point, she still maintained that she'd witnessed the crime, but the defense does a job of poking holes in her statement. So first, they start focusing in on her credibility as a witness. They point out differences in the various statements that she'd made over time, as well as differences with the actual crime. So they start comparing statements, and it gets kind of into the weeds, but it's just first you said this, and then you said this, and you said this, but that doesn't match up with the crime scene, which was this, right? Additionally, they bring in 2 witnesses. These are people who had said that they had seen Josette days after she went officially missing, which was October 3rd. Okay. One was a summer school friend who had been at the mall getting her eyeglass prescription, and she said that she had run into Josette there. And it was October 7th, and she was certain that it was October 7th that she was getting her eyeglass prescription. Another one was a teacher who said that she had seen Josette the following day, October 8th, in the Poughkeepsie Mall, and she was sure of that date because it was Columbus Day weekend. They both had told police this when Josette's body was found, but investigators manipulated both of them into taking back those statements. Basically, it goes like this. The testimony that these 2 would give, because Josette supposedly went missing on...
So there's the teacher and the school friend.
Mm-hmm.
They both think they saw her afterwards.
7th and 8th.
And she went missing on the 3rd.
The 3rd, yes.
Okay.
That would indicate there's a possibility that Josette actually did initially run away. Now, again, this is exactly what we talk about all the time when we talk about runaway cases, that they need to be taken seriously because those are also kids and people who might be at risk, right?
Absolutely.
Now, it would also mean that the statement they managed to get from Denise, that the police managed to get from Denise, would fall apart if that was true.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, so because she said that she had witnessed the murder the night Josette was reported missing, which would have been October 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
And the sheriff's department, they had, the statement they got from Denise was a pretty hard one. So like I said before, they had really hounded the initial kid, Dominic, right?
Right.
Showing up over and over and over. And this is the same tactic they used with Denise. They were
pulling her out of school too and doing all those things too? Or?
They were hounding her,
okay.
Right? But Denise was a little more serious. They actually found that she had been arrested for multiple things on a single day. And during this conversation, she was shown pictures of Josette's body. And she was also told she needed to, quote, get her story straight.
Okay.
And after Denise gave her statement, the charges against her from that day for various kind of drug things were dropped. They disappeared.
So Denise had a lot in this statement.
Yes.
Okay. Whoa. Okay.
So these witnesses seeing Josette possibly on the 7th and 8th, right? That would create a problem with Denise's statement, which she saw her on the 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
And that would then jeopardize their case against Anthony and Andrew because Denise was such a strong witness statement. Now, the friend who was from summer school, who was there getting her eyeglass prescription,
mm-hmm.
right, who says she saw her on the 7th, the police actually show her, the sheriffs actually show her a stub from the eyeglass store.
Okay.
Which was dated in September.
Oh, geez. So the month before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, they also had in their possession one from October.
Oh.
In fact, the day she claimed she had seen Josette, but they didn't show her that.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And so she starts thinking okay, maybe I've gotten the dates wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I actually did see her in September.
So they're bullying a child at this point? Well, is she older now? Years later?
This would have been when she was a teen. Yeah. So she starts thinking.
So this all still happened then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. So she's oh, maybe I was wrong.
Well, yeah.
And so she recants that that story. She's like,
They
okay,
still
I guess
have-
that's not
okay.
right, right?
Jeez, that's awful.
And with the teacher, they convinced them that it hadn't been Columbus Day weekend, but a different Jewish holiday in September.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like, oh, you must be wrong, right?
Huh. They're really shaping this.
Yeah, because like memory is actually a really tricky thing,
Yes.
right?
And it's easy to make someone doubt their memory.
Exactly. Now, by the time Anthony comes to trial again in 2016, these two people were ready to stick by what they had originally said, right? They're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if like through the years, if they just like thought about this over and over.
Oh,
and over,
definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
And Denise, she's confronted with this information during the trial, and she reveals like she had just said October 3rd because the sheriffs had told her that that's the day that Josette went missing.
Huh. Is it actually the day she went missing?
So that's the date she's last seen by her family.
Okay.
I get the sense, although it's not been talked about extensively, that Josette might have run away and then encountered someone who killed her. Right.
Right.
Particularly because these two are like, no, we saw her 7th, 8th. We saw her. So Denise, who had been kind of like a really key witness in this case, like they're just like poking holes in her story left and right, right? And this time the jury found Anthony not guilty. And so he was finally free.
What about Andrew?
So he's still left in jail, right?
Okay.
And the two had supposedly committed this crime together.
Right.
So like, does that make sense?
No.
So later that year, Andrew asks for the right to a new trial, but that request was denied.
This makes no sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, in 2020, the charges against Andrew were technically dropped. Like, it's a weird process. Like, the charges were dropped, but the DA decided to actually press for a new trial. So he's going to go to trial again, right? And that's actually something they're going to get blasted for later because, as a general rule of thumb, like, here would his case, like, just be dropped because he supposedly committed this crime with, Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even though Andrew was out of prison at this point, he was put on house arrest as they were waiting for the new trial to happen. But then his new court case hit a snag, and it hit it pretty quickly. Now, Anthony, who had been out of jail since 2016, right? He actually won a huge settlement from Putnam County and through the New York Court of Claims. We're talking many millions of dollars based on the wrongful conviction and the way his case was handled. And Joseph, the man who had played a key role in Anthony's trial based on his testimony of what H had told him in prison, wanted in on some cash. He said he wanted several $1 million wired to an offshore account in order for him to provide the same testimony in Andrew's case as he did in Anthony's.
Oh, wow.
Now, that is a crime.
Yeah.
But they managed to get Joseph's girlfriend on tape stating what Joseph wanted and why. Right. So Andrew's case was held up while they worked on getting Joseph and his girlfriend convicted for extortion. Right. So it was a huge part of that case. Now, in 2023, Andrew's case finally went to trial. And in addition to what was used in Anthony's case, there was also testimony about how there was no DNA evidence in the van that Andrew had supposedly been using at the time of the kidnapping that was linked to Josette. Okay, so they didn't find her DNA in there. And we're not talking about cleaned up van. We're talking like a messy teenager van, right? There was no evidence that this van had been cleaned to hide any evidence or anything like that. And there were also multiple witnesses who talked about how the van itself had actually been inoperable at the time. Now, during this 2023 trial for Andrew, they also bring in someone to talk about false confessions since Andrew had made that statement that he had sexually assaulted Josette. And it's important to understand false confessions do happen. They are indeed complicated, and there are a lot of contributing factors as to like why they might happen. Now, Andrew, for instance, had taken a lie detector test during the course of the initial investigation, and sheriffs lied to him and told him he'd failed.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
So, like, now you're like, oh, wait, because, like, before, you're just like, why would he say that?
Right.
Okay. Andrew had also been told that Anthony had implicated him in the crime.
Okay.
And the expert that had been brought in for Andrew's court case was also able to testify that Andrew had been told that the lie detector couldn't tell them if something had been done on accident or on purpose. So you've got this teenage boy, and he ends up asking, like, the sheriff's like, what would happen if it was an accident?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then not long after that, he asked if a rape was less serious than a murder. So in many ways, Andrew's conduct is that of many who end up offering false confessions. What they want is they want the questioning to end, and they sort of think in the short term. And in the short term, one way to get out of questioning and get the questioning to stop is to give the questioner what you believe they want, right? And particularly as a teenager whose brain is still developing, this short-term desire really outweighs their ability to think of the long-term consequences. Like, you just want the thing to end. Right?
Well, it's the idea of just like a person, or specifically a teenager, being pressured into anything, right?
Right.
Like, it can happen. But also, it sounded like the questioning was particularly aggressive, because we talked about like Dominic and Denise, and they had a similar experience, and now these boys too. So it just seemed very aggressive.
So like those involved in this case do get in trouble for this, I think, later. That is a completely different side story, so I'm not going to like get into that.
But they do like, for that?
It's like, this case is a mess. Now, this time in Andrew's case, they also have a statement from Denise that she made in 2019. And in it, she said she had lied about what she had witnessed.
Which we figured, right?
Now, the jury began deliberation on a Friday afternoon in Andrew's case. It ended that afternoon without a verdict, but they returned Monday and they found him not guilty. Now, like Anthony, Andrew would sue for his wrongful conviction, and he was awarded many millions of dollars, nearly twice as much as Anthony had received.
So where does this leave like Josette, like particularly like her mom or her family?
Yeah, I mean, I think about cases with wrongful convictions a lot, and it's incredibly hard on the victims' families. And that's because in order to pursue a wrongful conviction case, you have to say, hey, these people that you think did this thing, maybe they didn't do it, right? And so it can feel like in a lot of ways that you're working against the family or against the victim, in this case, Josette. And for Josette's mom, she's known with certainty who killed her daughter shortly after her daughter was found. And by that, I mean that 3 days after Josette's body was found, Anthony and Andrew are pulled over, right? And I'm sure investigators were telling her soon after that they'd found the people who did it, right?
Right.
And so, like, her conviction in, like, who did it has been well established for a long time. And so, in addition, she also sat through several trials and several attempts by both Anthony and Andrew to be released, listening to witnesses like Denise, who stood by their statements and talked in great detail about witnessing the brutal killing of her daughter.
How can you come back from that once you've heard it? Yeah.
Yeah. And like, once you've established this belief that Anthony and Andrew were,
they're always going to stay guilty in your mind.
How can you come back from that? Right.
Yeah.
And I can really see like these attempts to get their freedom, Anthony and Andrew, could feel like an attack on her and also Josette. Right. And yeah, when Anthony and Andrew were fighting for release, she was adamant that the right people were in prison. And even with Anthony's win and then Andrew's, she stood by that. And when Andrew won, she just left the courtroom directly after the announcement was made, right? And there's two things here. One is that in this process, Josette herself was often lost. Right? Like, you can tell, because even in this episode, as I'm trying to like work through all the pieces of Anthony and Andrew and what happened to them, like Josette starts to disappear. She fades into the background, and the story is dominated by their fight for their own justice. And at times during this court process, there were whole moves made by the court and whole meetings in which Josette's name was never mentioned once. And then there's like this concept of like, what can justice look like now? Right. So from 1997, when they were convicted, until 2016, for nearly 20 years, Josette's mom could be certain that someone was paying for their crime. And even after Anthony was left out, she spent another 10 years believing at least one man was spending time in prison for murdering her little girl. And now we're 2 years out from both Andrew and Anthony being exonerated, and she's left with what? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who killed her baby? Who's paying for the crime? There just doesn't seem to be a clear answer. There doesn't seem to be anything forthcoming in terms of trials or convictions. So I'm not going to attempt to understand what she must be feeling, but I can't imagine her loss. And I also do know that Josette deserves justice, and people need to hear about her and her life and remember her name. And all of that brings us to today, because as of today, no one has been convicted of Josette's murder. She was this incredibly beautiful middle school student, and her life ended before she even got to have a sense of what life could hold for her. And Robin is still missing. Now, during Anthony and Andrew's trials, Robin almost becomes a footnote. The two men were never accused of harming Robin. In fact, it doesn't seem like they even knew each other, despite all of them being from the same small town and close in age. But it's through their fight for release that the world first hears about H's confessions to others about Robin. First to the man at the bar, then to another inmate. And this is something that we might not know without their court cases. But I also said that after H was arrested for sexually assaulting Paula and for molesting Lainey, police did say they had, quote, the biggest break in the case.
Yeah. I'm waiting for that.
Yeah. They refused to say what it was, but during Anthony's trial, what was finally, it finally became clear as part of the evidence used in his case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So according to what we know, during their search of H's home and Paula's vehicle after his arrest, investigators came across a suitcase in H's possession. Inside were women's underwear. After testing some of this underwear was linked to women who had spoken out against him, like the women who had given their testimonies, like Anne Marie. But one pair was linked to Robin. Her DNA was found on it. So H was in possession of Robin's underwear.
So now are they gonna?
Well, so police confronted him about this. So mind you, they discovered this back in 2001. So that's 24 years ago. So weird to think.
They found it in 2001.
Mm-hmm. Yes. When police confronted him, he seemed surprised that they'd found it, let alone match the pair to Robin. And at first he just said he wasn't sure how the underwear got there. Not sure. They interviewed him for about 90 minutes, and the investigators felt, based on his body language, that he was indicating deception during this interview process. I believe that later he claimed that he would take home laundry left over from the laundromat that he was working at the year Robin disappeared, and that he would sell the garments. But even that explanation wouldn't make sense if the other pairs of underwear were linked to women who had made legal statements about him assaulting him.
Right.
Or why would he have this pair of underwear for 5 or 6 years at that point? Because this is...
It gets a little weird at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, then there's the necklace. So during the search, they found a necklace that investigators believe may have been linked to Robin. To my knowledge, they've never definitively linked this necklace to her, but it's likely the necklace that H referred to when telling Joseph about his crimes. So if you remember, he said to Joseph, basically, oh, they found a necklace that they're trying to pin on me, basically. Mm-hmm. These would be major pieces of evidence against him, right? What also came out in the court documents during Anthony's legal battle were other pieces of documents. And when we talk about Robin specifically, one of those documents was a letter from 2003, so that's now 22 years ago, from a Carmel detective, Brian Karst, to H, who was then in prison. In part, Karst wrote, "Atone for the people you have wronged in your life." And he listed amongst them names, and amongst them was Robin. Karst went on to write, "You hold the key to this mystery, H, and you can unlock the door for yourself and the Murphy family. I urge you to do this and set yourself free of the torment you must be feeling. Allow Robin to find her stairway to heaven." It was clear at this point that investigators still believed that he was responsible for Robin's disappearance. But as of today, we're 31 years after Josette's murder. No one new has been arrested in her murder, and we're 30 years after Robin's disappearance, and Robin is still missing, and no one has been arrested in connection with her case. H remains in prison for the crimes against Paula and Lainey. In April of 2024, there was a brief hope that Robin had finally been found. Crews were doing excavation work for the construction of a single-family home near Ice Pond Road and Tommy Thurber Lane, which is not far from the location where Josette had been found. So they discovered these human remains. Because of the history involving Robin in this area, speculation immediately turned to the possibility that this was Robin. And of course, gossip was spreading through like social media channels as it does. And that's when Robin's cousin, Judith's niece, posted to social media to emphasize that the family had never been contacted by authorities about this find at this house, which I'd like to point out should just be protocol in situations like this.
Well, right.
Like, even if you don't think it's going to be Robin, like, contact her mom and let her know so that she can prepare, so that when she logs on to social media or runs into someone in the store, she can prepare for something like that, right? Judith's niece wrote that speculation had caused too much grief for my aunt, which is a reminder that when we are talking about cases and having speculation about cases, it's not a neutral act. I've been talking about, Robin and Josette here, which I'm trying to do with as much care as possible. It's not neutral. There are people who are impacted by hearing these stories. Now, these remains are later identified as Karen Ramsey, who was a 25-year-old mother who had been missing since 1980, and she had been murdered. And like I often see in cases like this, Karen's story was kind of overshadowed by the fact that she wasn't Robin, right? It's like people really hoped it was Robin, and then it wasn't. They're like, oh.
But she's still important.
Right. So this week, I'm going to share more about Karen on my newsletter, Girl Hunt, which you can find on Substack, because Karen's story needs to be heard as well, right? But this also means that officially 30 years have passed without knowing where Robin is. Her mother, again, had described the pain of not knowing where her daughter is as a type of never-ending nightmare. It's a knowing and not knowing. It's a place where her daughter is gone, but her ability to mourn her or to visit her grave are curtailed by all the ways in which truth has been hidden. So I want to share what Judith said over 20 years ago on the 10-year anniversary of Robin's disappearance. So many people know. I just hope someone develops a conscience.
We are now going to listen to Amy's poem, In the Dark Places, read by Nora McLellan. Nora is a Canadian actor with an extensive career across theatre, television, and film. A veteran of both the Stratford and Shaw festivals, she has earned 2 Dora Mavor Moore Awards, a Jessie Award, and multiple nominations, recognizing her versatility and craft. On stage, McLellan has starred in productions ranging from classics to contemporary hits, including Shirley Valentine, Anne of Green Gables, Hello Dolly, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. At Stratford and Shaw, she has played leading roles in Cabaret, Gypsy, St. Joan, The House of Bernarda Alba, and The Trojan Women, among dozens of others. Her screen work includes recurring and guest roles on Son of a Critch, Revival, Killjoys, Cardinal, Orphan Black, and Saving Hope. And her film credits include Sometimes the Good Kill, Tart, My Own Country, and Double Double Toil and Trouble.
In the Dark Places, Robin Murphy, 17, missing since April 9th, 1995, from Carmel, New York. They say the ramshackle engine of your heart doesn't know how to mourn, can't feel the wailing tremor of loss. But as blood pulses through your body, what else but the heart can remember the soft curve of your baby's cheek? The way her fingernails looked like half moons, her eyes lit up like stars. What else could hear her calling to you in the dark woods of the night? Every season, you know the intricacies of the ground. The way the grasses give way to mud, the slope of snow on the hills. You know every pathway through the cemeteries, the secret places littered with trash generations of teenagers left behind. Each thrumming beat of your heart a reminder that once you knew how to breathe.
For more information about our show, please visit shegoesbyjanepodcast.com.
Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.